Let's do that. Let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I know it's been a while since that first session. I think it's been a whole month now. I'm sorry for the delay. Hopefully we have people who were part of that first session and maybe others who weren't actually able to attend the first session. If you didn't attend the first session, hopefully you got a chance to take a look at the resources that we put online, the slides from last time, so that it'll be easier to follow with what's going on today. Since this is part 2, let me just, let's see if we can scroll forward. Why is this not working? Come on, next screen. There we go. Just a little recap of what we covered last time and what we will be covering this time. So last time we started out with some of the basics of just what is a read-along, and we talked about what makes cataloging read-alongs so challenging. We spent a lot of time talking about how to choose a record to import, and how even that can be very difficult when dealing with read-alongs. So I wanted to ask the group here, because I want this to be a fairly interactive session, what are some of the highlights that you remember from that first session? I know some people don't necessarily have aren't able to have a microphone, but anyone who wants to say anything about what they got out of the last session, or some of the key points that we talked about. The 006. What about the 006?
Being, there we go, sorry. Being able to make when we're doing the CD and book, the book with CD, when we're changing over from, how we used to put the $H was sound recording, and it either showed either the book or the CD. And so being able to go in and use the 6 and the 7, the 006 and the 007, so that we can at least get the pictures up there. I know that when I'm working with patrons, a lot of times if we don't narrow it down, our search parameters, being able to have both those little icons pop up is fabulous. So being able to put the 06 and the 07 in right away when I'm working with a patron, spot it right away and go fix it.
So just to clarify, so the 33X's are the ones that help with make sure that they generate the icons, right?
Right.
So the 006s and the 007s are important components, but they're fields that we need in order to make sure that we're capturing all of the different elements, right? That read-alongs basically are made up of multiple components, and so we have to address all of these different components within the record, and I think that's what you're kind of getting at there, right, Lisa?
Right. Well, yeah, and by knowing when you're putting in the 06 and the 07, that makes it so you can put your 3XXs in the correct order and make sure that you've got your spoken, your still, your audio, and you're able to cover, if you see it, and being able to perform to music, being able to put that in, if they want to know, because a couple of these do have the songs that go with them, and I haven't been able to use them all the way yet, but I'm getting to see all of the possibilities of what we're going to be able to do if we, as we go deeper with this. So yeah, keying in the 06, keying in the 07, paying attention to the 3XXs, and of course adding the read-along, that 690. I love that. What was the other thing? Oh, I did run into one thing yesterday on the 007. It wouldn't display, it was displaying the little book icon okay, but it wouldn't display the disc. It wouldn't display the disc, and I checked the 3X's, the whole works. When I replaced, the 007 had a couple of M's where the slashes are. So I went in and I replaced the 007 with the one that you gave us, and then a little disc popped up. So yeah, it had to do with both of them on that one.
Okay, great. Well, we will be working on some examples later on in the session. And so, like I think a lot of questions will come up as we actually work through different examples. Um, so I want to, let's see. Well, we'll talk a little bit about the different record types, just to make sure that everyone is still still understands the different distinctions. Before we get started, because we're going to spend so much time today working specifically on the fixed length data fields, and in particular the 008 and the 006, I wanted to just offer a few notes about the 008 and the 006 before we get started, things that hopefully you'll be able to keep in mind as we start looking at these different fields. So obviously the 008 and the 006 vary by the item, and so in some respects are unique to each item that we're actually cataloging, but they also vary by the type of record. And so that's something to note as well. They vary by the item and by the type of record. They're also complementary because they're actually describing different components of the read-along, which is a multi-component item. They're working in unison to describe the entire item. Now, because the 008 and the 006 vary by the type of record, I want to make sure that we go back over that information. If you recall, when we're looking at read-alongs, there are kind of most read-alongs then will fall into one of three different categories. So it'll either be that the book and the CD contain identical material. And if you remember from last time, we said that there's kind of a general rule for read-alongs, and that is that if everything is equal, if the book and CD contain identical material, we will still treat the CD, the sound recording, as primary, because that's the nature of what a read-along is, that you're kind of, that someone would be listening to recording and then following along the written text. So we privilege the CD in this case, and so then the record type that you would choose would either be an I record or a J record, depending on whether it's a musical sound recording or a non-musical sound recording. The other scenario is that the CD contains all the material that's in the book, but it also has some additional material like songs, activities. It sometimes may even have like a short video. Again, the CD would be favored in that case, would be the primary item or the primary component. And again, you would have a choice of a record type I or a record type J. And then that third scenario is that the book actually contains significantly more material than the CD. And in that case, we would choose a record type A. Let's see here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 008s. I think it's important to first think about the 008 before we start talking about the 006, because you kind of need to understand what's being represented in the 008. Also because the 008 is always going to be present in a record. It's automatically generated. It's generated from the fixed field data that's in a record. And so it will be there. Sometimes 006s, particularly for read-alongs, may not actually already be included in a record that you're importing. So it's easiest to think first, to look first at the 008. Now, generally, I think we kind of, most of us when we're cataloging, we don't necessarily look specifically at the 008. We're just looking at the fixed fields, right? So we kind of trust that the 008 is right. With read-alongs, I think there's a little bit more of a chance that there might be errors in the 008, and that's because sometimes the fixed fields are wrong. It's probably because read-alongs tend to be very difficult items to catalog. There isn't necessarily like a consensus about how they should be cataloged. So we see different kinds of records to import, and even the way that the records looked and how things get filled in can vary quite a bit. There's also the factor that I think sometimes a read along is published after, say, a standalone book has already been published, and what might happen is that if the standalone book record already exists, that might be used as the base for creating a read-along record. And so sometimes in kind of transferring that information, not everything gets recorded properly. So it is a good idea to take a look at the 008 to verify that the information in that field does correspond with what you are looking at. But even with the 008, it's a field that depends on what is considered the primary element. So in this case, we're looking at record type A, so a book record, and the 008 will be the sequence and the codes there are based on the fact that it's a type A record. And so here we can actually take a look at how the 008 varies depending on that record type. So we have, I've just kind of made up a 008. This is fictitious for an item. And these are all 008s that could potentially exist to describe the same item depending on whether it was considered a record type A, I, or J. And so you can see it's the part that's highlighted in red that varies, and you can see that there's quite a bit of variation within that red zone. Let's take a look at the actual breakdown of that. I know that it's hard to look at these really long codes and feel comfortable because there's just so much information encoded in this particular sequence. So here I've tried to break it down a little bit better for you. Again, I've highlighted that middle portion that is going to vary according to the record type, but the bits on the end in black are going to be consistent, as we saw with that last slide. All of that is consistent with these three different record types. And the reason why it's consistent is because this is more of that like kind of publication information. So if we look at the that first set of numbers, that's the date that the MARC record was entered on file. So in this case, it would be like 2016, February 15th. Okay. That next, sorry, I'm pulling up my own cheat sheet to make sure that I've got, oh wait, I don't need that yet. Okay, so then that next entry there is the type of, the S is the type of date, which remember the information that we find in the 008 is being drawn directly from the fixed field elements. So to make it easier to understand here, the type of date, that would be that that field, I think it stands for date status, but the DTST that we see, let me go flip back. I don't know, here's the DTST here. So that's the S. and in this case referring to a single date. And so then that next step is the publication dates. Because it was a single date, we just have the first of those the first 4 positions in that part of the sequence filled in. So 2016. Had another date been entered, for instance, if it had been a DTST with a T, and we had the publication date and the copyright date, then we would see all of those 8 positions filled in. In this case, because we only had the one, then we have the backslashes for blanks for the second, for the date number 2. And then after that, we have the country code, in this case, CA for California and U for United States. And then at the end of the sequence, we have the code for the language, English. Then it's a modified record, which is MREC. And that's whether or not the record has been modified. For the most part, you're going to see that as a backslash, which means that the record has not been modified. And then that very last position is a D for the source, and that can vary. But again, that's information that you're generally going to find in those fixed fields, and that you don't really have to worry about. All of that is already been established. So it's really just this middle red part that we have to that we're really concerned with, that we want to verify, and that then is also going to help us in the creation of the 006 as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. So let's look a little bit more closely at that variable portion of the 008. So here we have that, and again, this is character positions 18 through 34, and they're defined by the type of material, or by the record type. So in this case, I've provided an example for a book for an A record, and here, so the character positions that we're looking at here are it starts with the illustration. So I've used the fixed field codes there to make it easier to think more about, like, what you would see in those boxes at the top of the record. But so ILS for illustrations, and in this case, right, it's one of those positions. That first position, 18, has been filled in with an A, meaning that there are illustrations in this book, and then the remaining 3 have been left blank. That's followed by the target audience. In this case, it's J for juvenile. The next one, which would be position 23, is the form of the item. In most cases, we're going to see that as a backslash. It's blank. Sometimes you'll only see that as not blank with an actual code in there when, for instance, the item, maybe it's like a large print book or microfilm. Sometimes we see O for an online resource. Sometimes you might see Q for direct electronic, meaning that it's a CD that requires a computer to be used. But so for the most part, especially for read-alongs, generally we're going to find that as blank. And then the next set, which is numbers 24 through 27, that's the nature of the contents. Again, if that's blank in the fixed fields, then that will be blank in the 008 as well. Sometimes this is that fixed field where, if this particular item had a bibliography, had a bibliography included, then that you might see a B in that area. Then that next position, number 28, government publication. So this is not a government publication, nor is it a conference publication. It's not a festschrift either. And in this case, it does not have an index. That next position, number 32, is undefined. So that gets a blank. That's just always going to be a blank position. And then we've got literary form, in this case fiction. So we've got a number 1 there, and then it ends with whether it's a biography or contains biographical material, and in this case no, so we have that as a blank. So now, as I said, that these are the character positions specifically for a book. What we'll see here on the next slide is the character positions for a sound recording. And in this case, you'll notice, right, that what's being recorded in this section is very different, whereas we started out with the book listing whether there were any illustrations. For the sound recording, it starts out with the form of the composition, and it's just character or positions 18 and 19. But those first 4 positions, in fact, are tied to musical sound recording. So form of composition, format of music, and music parts, because here I'm providing an example of a non-musical sound recording. Those first 4 positions, we're using N for not applicable. And so that will be something that is consistent for all non-musical sound recordings, because obviously it's asking information about the music in the recording, and if it's a non-musical sound recording, then there isn't going to be any music. So again, then we come back to the target audience, again, juvenile form, and then this next set varies as well. That's character positions 24 through 29, which is accompanying matter. So in this case, now this looks a little different from, say, if we just had a standard audio book. What we would tend to see for a standard audio book is in that first position 24 for accompanying matter. Instead of a D, we would probably just see another backslash, meaning that there was no accompanying matter with the audio book. But in this case, because we've got the read along and we have both the book as text and the CD with the sound recording, we've included a D here to make reference to the text that's in the book portion of the item. Does everyone understand? Did that make sense to everyone? Thank you, Beth, for the yes. Again, we'll come back when we go through examples. We can talk more about this whole segment of accompanying matter, because that can get a little tricky trying to record. So the next sequence here. Let's see. We have where are we? Literary text. Oops, I think did I make a mistake? I'm missing a blank here. So it should be literary text for sound recordings, and that should be, there should be 2 spaces there. So there should be an F and then a backslash, so character positions 30 to 31, then followed by an undefined backslash. So sorry, I'll have to fix that before we get these posted. But for here, the literary text for sound recordings, in this case, because it's a, with the read along, it's a non-musical. We've got fiction as the literary text. Then again, there should be an additional backslash in there, undefined. Then transposition and arrangement. We've got an N for not applicable. Again, that's for if it's a musical recording, and then another backslash for an undefined position. Any questions just on that? Let me actually pull it up here, and because we can take a look at, hopefully everyone got a chance to print out the cheat sheets that I sent around, but let's go ahead and pull that up. Anyway, oops, that's the 06 one. Here's the 008 one. And so as you can see here with the sound recordings, the character positions are the same for both types of sound recordings, whether it's musical or non-musical. It's really how that gets filled in and the codes that are used that will vary, even if the information that's being described there is the same. Any questions so far on the 008?
So Anna, on the literary form, it could be either the 1 or the F.
Oh, so sorry, and this is a good screen for us to look at right now. So remember, literary form for books, so 33, position 33 for books is different from literary text for sound recordings, positions 30 to 31 for sound recordings. So they get coded differently, and they actually are represented differently, right? So
Oh, okay.
literary
I see.
form is lit F, and
Yeah.
then literary text is L text. I know it's all this stuff gets really confusing, especially when you're trying to create these and verify the 008s and 006s. It's hard to remember what's what. So hopefully, I think I certainly, whenever I'm working on these, I myself have to pull out the cheat sheets to remind
Yeah.
myself of what's going on here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I see on your 008 sheets you have the list of codes, and it is a different set of codes. So I was just
Yeah.
clarifying. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we'll come back to this when we go through some of these examples. Thank you for bringing that up, Beth. Any other questions? Oh, oops, I missed that. Let's see, what did Lisa say here? Oh, thank you, Lisa, because that wasn't a question.
No, I've been trying to figure out the 008 and the 006 and the 007 for the last year since we started talking about doing these read-alongs, and I've been and same with the RDAs. I've been doing a lot of the extra little YouTube things and the different libraries, Nebraska and Illinois does one maybe too, that I've been, or Indiana, I mean. So I've been trying to figure a lot of this out, and truly, this is one of the best. I think that you need to put this out on the public waves. This is really, really understandable. Thank you. This was a lot of work. So
Thanks, Lisa.
I appreciate it a lot.
Anyone else with a question? Well, there will be still more time to ask questions, so why don't we go ahead and move on to the 006s. Let's see, current slide. Okay, so the 006 it provides information about the accompanying material. And since with read-alongs we always have multiple components, we should always have at least one 006 beyond, right, the 008, which is describing the primary component. And of course that as well is going to vary depending on the record type. So if it's a record type I, then the 008 will be describing the CD, whether it's a sound, the sound recording, whether it's musical or non-musical, and then the 006 will be providing information about the book. If the record type is A, then the 008 will be describing the book, and the 006 will need to provide information about the CD, which may contain either musical or non-musical sound recordings, or it may have both. And in that case, you might actually need to have two 006s. It'll kind of depend on, how significant material there is of each of those of the different kinds of sound recording. And then if it's a record type J, then the 008 is going to describe the sound recording, the musical sound recording, and the 006, like with the record type I, will be providing information about the book. So let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. So here I've taken the 008 and the 006 for a long that's called Star Wars: Three Tales of Adventure. This is one where the book and the CD have identical material, so we're choosing a record type I. So then, as I said before, then the 008 is going to be describing the material that's on the CD. In this case, it's we can kind of see there with the four ends there that it's probably, right, the non-musical sound recording, although you can have a musical sound recording with that as well. But in this case, it is for a non-musical sound recording, the 008. And then this is the 006 that we would have for this particular item. So with the 006s, so in that first position, which is actually not called position number 1, but position 00, which makes things very confusing. So that is going to be the form of material, which is basically the same as, it uses the same codes as the type fixed field. But in this case, obviously, if we're looking at the record for Star Wars: Three Tales of Adventure and we look up in the fixed field boxes, what we're going to see under in the type box is we're going to see an I, right? So because this is for the book, we need to remember that the form of material, that position should not be what you see in the type box of the fixed fields. So here it's A for book. That's followed by positions 01 through 04 for illustrations. We can see here that there's an A in that first position, so that means that there are illustrations in this book, or in this read along. That's then followed by the audience. and so like in the 008, we can actually pull that. We see that it's J for the target audience in the 008, so we can just replicate that and put a J for the audience in the 006. The form is also going to be blank. In this case, with the contents, or the from 007 to position 10, that's the nature of the contents. In this case, again, we're not going to see that. I don't think that will be I don't think there will be a box for that in the fixed fields on this record. I think, if I remember correctly, and we can look at that in a second, with the record type I, there won't be a box for contents. But in this case, that is left blank. If there were a bibliography, then we might actually put a B in there. But in this case, there wasn't a bibliography, so all of those end up being blank. Again, it's not a government publication. It's not a conference publication, festschrift. There was no index. The next position is set as blank because it's undefined. And as we see here, so getting back to the whole literary, what is it? What was it? What were the literary form versus literary text for sound recordings in the 008? Because that F there is for the literary text for sound recordings, and so we're using a code F for fiction. But because in the 006 we're talking about a book, it switches to literary form, and we're using the code 1 to designate fiction. And then that last one, again, it's not a biography and doesn't have biographical content. So you can see there's a little bit of information that kind of parallels in the 006 and the 008, but not necessarily. Like, you can't actually look at the fixed fields for this record and be able to just easily create that 006. Maybe let's go ahead and take a look at that record so we can see the fixed fields at the top of the screen as well. So let me get back out of this. Oops, there we go. And here we have, oops, I need to, oops, this doesn't look like, there we go. Okay, just took a minute. Let's get out of flat text editor so we can see those fixed fields. Oops. Sorry. There we go. So, right, as I said, in terms of filling in the 006, the nature of contents, there isn't a box for, it would be CONT, right? And it doesn't exist because those are the fixed fields for a type I record. So that's something that you're going to have to verify from the record, other elements in the record, or from the item itself, whether anything needs to get filled into the 007 to 10 positions in a 006. Sorry, that probably didn't sound wasn't very easy to understand. But so in this record, we see that, and I don't remember if it was that I entered this information or if it was already in the record, but here we have a record where here's the 008, we have a 006, that is correct, and we also have the 007 already in the record. Now, a lot of the records that we look at are not going to, that's not going to be the case. So we can talk about that when we go through different examples. Any questions again? Sorry, let me go back, pull this up. Any questions on the 006? Let me go ahead and pull up as well the cheat sheet for the 006. So we have, hopefully you have these in hand, right? There are 3 different ones. One is for record type A, where the accompanying CD is a non-musical recording. We have another one for record type A, where the 006 is for a musical recording, and then a cheat sheet for a record type I or J, where the 006 would be for the accompanying book. If there aren't any questions, let me go ahead and pull up the next screen here. So I wanted to mention something about how to use the cheat sheet. So again, we'll be posting the 006 one and the other one, the comparison of 008 by record type. But I wanted to just make sure that everyone understood that the cheat sheets are really meant to be a tool to help you kind of understand and decipher the 006 and the 008 as you work through these records. They're not meant to be, like, if we take a look at those sheets, right? And in each case, I've provided an example, as well as in these slides, I'm providing examples, but these aren't examples that you can just cut and paste into a record, because again, each 006 and then like with the 008s are going to vary by that specific item. And even though as you work through these 006s, chances are you're going to be creating or seeing 006s that look fairly similar, and you might, most of them that you enter in might look exactly like the examples that I've provided in these cheat sheets. But I don't want you to assume that, like, this is just a standard formula that you would use for a book that has an accompanying CD that's a non-musical sound recording. You still need to actually look at the item, look at the record to make sure that the information is correct, and make modifications as needed. And just to pull up this screen again, to highlight the fact that, okay, so like for instance, with this first sheet, okay, obviously the 006 is describing the accompanying CD, which is a non-musical recording. So that position 00 is always going to be an I. And if it's an I for a non-musical sound recording, then it'll always be followed by 4 N's, right? But the rest of these fields, like the target audience is variable, the accompanying matter, those positions are variable as well, as is 13 and 14 for the literary text. So those are all ones that that you need to verify, and that can vary depending on the item that you have. So when you go through the cheat sheets, do make sure that you're paying attention to those notes and what is simply like, the form of material, obviously, for this next one has to be J, but some of these other ones, there are choices that need to be made with regard to what gets entered into those particular character positions. And some of that, if the 006 is already there, and in particular for something like this, if we're doing the 006 for a musical recording and it's already been entered in as like maybe the code for songs, obviously you'll want to leave that if in fact it's describing songs. You'll want to use unknown if you really aren't able to determine what that is. If there's already an N for not applicable, you'll probably just want to leave that because it may mean that the person who had created the record, or catalogers who had looked at the record prior to your importing the record, had already determined that, say, there were no music parts, and so it was not applicable. If they happen to not, if there's nothing in there, then it might mean the point is that these are something that you should actually look at to make sure that that actually corresponds with the item that you have in hand. So as we can see, that there are quite a few of these character positions that are variable. So again, any questions so far? Let's see. So very quickly, and we talked about this last time as well, but just a little reminder about the 007, that it's providing information specifically about the CD. So that will be the same regardless of the type of record. It's also really just describing like the physical characteristics of the CD. And so that's fairly straightforward. The creation of that, if one isn't already in the record, is fairly straightforward because we have the physical characteristics wizard in Evergreen to help with that. So I'm not going to go over that. Just want to finish up here before we move to specific examples. Just a quick review of the things that we need to add and verify to records. So there are specific elements that need to get added because they're specific to Sage. And we talked about this before, that inserting that GMD into the 245, so the subfield H, book with CD. And just as a reminder to everyone, regardless of the type of record that you're using, so it could be a type I record where the CD is the primary component. We still want to just use that same GMD, book with CD, for all read-alongs. Okay. You'll want to add the 690 that specifies read along, which is like a local subject heading. That just makes excuse me, the searching of read-alongs a little bit easier, since a lot of times the actual words read along do not appear anywhere in the title. So that helps. One thing that I want to note here, and I've added it on the slide, is that there should be a period at the end of that. And then the addition of the 999s, we want to make sure that everyone's adding both audiobook CD and book. In some cases, you might also add music CD. Again, that's going to depend on whether it seems like the music is like a strong component of this particular item. But regardless, we want you to always make sure that both audiobook CD and book are in that 999. and then the elements to verify, modify, and or modify, again, the 006, 007, 008. The 300 field, do make sure that the physical description is correct. And what I mean by that is that if you've chosen a record type A, then in that 300 field, the subfield A should be describing the book portion of the item, and it's that additional plus subfield E that then describes the CD component, right, and not the reverse order. So make sure that order is correct. And then with the 33X's, of making sure that there's one set for each component, again, because the 33X's are the fields that are generating the icons that we see in the search results. So those are very helpful. So if there aren't any questions, oh, let's see. What did Beth just say? So Beth just added, oh, Ellen asked, let me see if okay. Ellen asked a question, is the 007 used only for CDs or other types to books? And Beth said, we only need 007 for any media like CDs or DVDs. And Dia added, you will occasionally see 007s for book. However, they are not really of much value or importance. And I think, Dia, you added that because we should really be using the 006 to describe those other components, right?
Yes, but you will occasionally see an 007. They're very, very few and far between. And it's like, you'll see like two characters in them, and one of them's like a T for text.
Ah.
But for the most part, they really are not of any value to.
Right. So don't let, if you see something like that, don't let that stand in for 006. You would still want to put in the 006 for the text part of the item. Okay. So why don't we go ahead and start looking at some examples? I think that will make this, hopefully make a lot of this become a little more clear and easier to work with. There's nothing like doing it yourself. Sorry, trying to still get, oh, I'm out of this screen. There we go. One thing that I want to highlight, because I know that some of you might have already transitioned to using the web client. So one of the things that I noticed, particularly if you're working with 006s and 008s, if you, come on. My computer is just being slow. Come on, there we go. If we look at the mark view, oops, come on. You'll notice for the 006 and the 008 that we have spaces in there, but it's hard to tell what is actually going on there because we just see like blank spaces. And even in the mark edit, if we're looking at the flat text editor, unfortunately, one of the things, and I don't know if Beth, if this is going to get corrected, but with the flat text editor in the web client, we have this similar sort of view where we don't have those backslashes standing in for a blank space. So obviously when you're looking at this and if you're trying to modify it, it makes it difficult to see what positions are what. because you don't have a character actually in those blank spaces. Let's go back to the view in the staff client. So even though if in this particular view, we're not able to see that, if we go to the flat text editor, right, we get the backslashes, which makes it so much easier when you're trying to figure out where you are in that particular sequence. So today we're going to work with the staff client, and at least for the moment, if you're working on the read-alongs and trying to verify the 006s and 008s and even modify them, I do recommend using the staff client instead of the new web client, because it's just going to be a lot easier. Beth, do you know if there's going to be a fix for that in the web client?
And I don't, but I'm making a note of it so I can check on it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So here, let's see, we're in Star Wars. So I thought we could go ahead and take a look at the records for the items that we talked about in that first session. So one of them that we looked at was a child's introduction to poetry. And if you remember, well, you probably don't, but so I will remind you, this was a book where we felt that a record type A, a book record, was the best for this particular item, because the material that was provided on the CD was just a reading of the verses, but within the book there was a lot more information besides just the verse. It like talks about different poets and the history of poetry. So the book definitely seemed like the primary component for this particular item. So let's go ahead and take a look. I need to reduce that so we can get to the mark edit. So here, oops, sorry, I went back to that text. Let's go back to the regular so we can see the fixed field. So here we see that it is a type A record. And we can see as well from here. So here's the 008. It looks like there are two 006s as well as a 007 in this record. So let me go back to flat text, because it'll be easier for us to look at those with the flat text editor. So what can we say about this record? We've got the 008, two 006s. Anyone see anything particular about those 006s?
No one else chimes in. One is for kit and one is for sound recording.
And how did we figure that out?
From the first character position, or the OO.
Yeah. Right, so one starts with an O and one starts with an I, right? So if you remember from the last session, the previous policy for read-alongs was that they would be labeled kits, which we're no longer doing. So I think that we'll go ahead and modify this. We can go ahead and eliminate the 006 for the kit. because that's no longer relevant for us. Unless, Dia, Beth, do you have any thoughts? Like, should we still leave it, or if a 006 is present that is representing a kit, or should we just get rid of it to make sure that we're kind of staying consistent?
I'm not sure that the 006 was created previously with it being a kit because they were set as the type of record was kit rather
Right.
than book. So I'm not sure where that 006 came from.
I think in most cases it can be eliminated. I'm just trying to think of a read along that would end up having like little stuffed characters to go along with the story, or would there be a chance that there would be also some kit contents along with the read along? I'm stretching.
Yeah,
Right.
that would be the only reason I would think the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. So it seems like, yeah, for most of our read-alongs, and certainly the case with this particular one, there isn't anything else added on besides the book and the CD itself. So that 006 for the kit seems a bit out of place. So Ellen asked the question, what does the O stand for? So O is the kit record type, is the code for kit for type of record, in the same way that I is for non-musical sound recording, A is for book, J is for musical sound recording. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get rid of that. So then we see that there is a 006.
Can I make a quick note, Anna?
Yeah.
If you are hesitant for some reason, or you are concerned about whether you should remove it or not, that would be an ideal situation to refer it to one of the mentors.
Yeah, and especially if there are a lot of records attached and it's possible that that something looks a little different. So thanks, Dia, yeah, for mentioning, right? Anytime you're curious, if you're concerned about something, you're not quite sure what to do, please reach out to the mentors so we can help with that. So here with the 006 non-musical sound recording, if everyone wants to pull out their cheat sheets, is there anything that you might change for the 006 that's in this record?
Would we change out the first two slashes and put ends in there instead?
Right, so that would be better to have ends that specifically say that it's a non-musical sound recording. The backslashes in this are, let's see, let me make sure that I'm getting this correct. Nothing is stated with regard to what that, so it was probably that somebody didn't know how to code it, and so they put in backslashes. So the most appropriate here would be to have two ends there for the form of composition, which basically again means that it's not applicable because there isn't music. So we've got it starting with four ends, again referring to the music portion. That's followed by a B, which would be the target audience.
So primary.
Primary.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that that was also what is listed in the 008. We see a B up there. Then it's followed by backslashes all the way to this position number 33, which is that N for transposition and arrangement. So here we could actually, let's see, so we've got the B, and then the form of item would be this next one that we would want to leave blank. So here we could actually, as I mentioned before, because there is accompanying matter, which is the text, we could actually enter a D in there for text. And it looks like, so then the next thing that we would want to verify is to move down to positions, it would be here, 30 to 31, literary text for sound recordings. In this case, if we go to our, if we look up our codes, so nothing was put in there. I'm trying to see here if there was, it doesn't list.
P
You
for
have the
poetry?
right, where is that? Again, the right, P for poetry. So we probably would want to have a P here for poetry. And then in the 008, it looks like what happened is that, let me go back to the regular view. The nothing was specified in terms of the literary form.
That's actually nonfiction.
Sorry, it was not fiction, but sorry, it wasn't specified that it was poetry.
Correct.
So we could actually change that to P.
And in case anyone's wondering why that may have not been done the first time, those are newer codes than just plain fiction and nonfiction. They were added in later. So depending on the date of the item, the date of the record, you may find that to be a situation.
Anna, can you right click on the lit F field so that they can see that there's a list of codes to choose from?
Oh, great. Ah, yes.
I use that quite a bit because sometimes you just don't remember what the code is.
Yes. Any help we can get, right?
Exactly.
So that's great. Yeah. So, and one of the things, so because I then, when I changed that to P and then save the record, we see now that the, in the 008, there is a P there, for poetry. And so then again, but we, of course, change the, it wouldn't have done anything to the 006 because again, the 006 isn't automatically generated. So we would still need to make sure that that's correct.
And actually, to get that to populate, you can just move it to another box in the fixed fields. You don't even have to do save record at that point.
Sorry?
So when you put the P in the lit F box, if it doesn't populate into the 008 string, just move it to a different box or move it out of the fixed fields boxes.
The cursor, move on to the next box and it will, so it will automatically.
It'll save you a step or two.
Okay, great. That's good to know. So that change will pop up automatically if you move out of that particular field, fixed field. So let's see. Oops. So actually, let me go back to the flat text editor. So there we fixed our 006 and our 008. We want to verify, let's see. So we see here, right, that there isn't a GMD for in the 245. So we would want to add that, subfield H. CD. We see here, so here we have the 300 and we want to verify that, right? That here in the subfield A, the book is being described, and then we have the plus subfield E for the audio disc. One of the things that I want to point out is then, so all of the information that's describing the physical characteristics of the audio disc will be put in parentheses. And here you'll notice that we didn't, even though this would normally be like in a subfield B, we're not actually adding a subfield B here. We're just listing digital. We have the semicolon, and then without the subfield C, just adding in the 4 3/4 inches. And then again, all of that gets placed in parentheses. So here we see that there for the 33X's that we've only got information about the book. We don't have additional information about the CD. Let me see. Let me pull up here. So with this, we would, if we have a record type A, we would probably want the 33X's to look something more like this, where we have information about the book itself. It has significant images, so we can add a 336 listing still images. And then here we have the 336 for the spoken or the non-musical sound recording, spoken word, followed by then the set of 337. So one for, again, this is unmediated, which is tied back to the text. And then the 338, which is also part of the text. Here's the 337 and the 338 for the CD, the spoken word part. Let me see if I can just actually copy this and paste that in. At the moment, what's actually, let me save this and we'll go back to look at the opaque view. Oops, come on, sorry. So as we can see, because there was only one set of 33X's for the book itself, the only icon that is appearing in the record is for a book. And if we go and update that, then we can get all of the icons to display. So hopefully, go. Save record. I'll flip back to that in a minute. Let's just make sure and see if. Sorry for this taking so long. Yeah. So we would want to add the 690. 690. It was. And then we have the 999's book and audiobook CD. So let's go ahead and save that. And now we have the appropriate icons. And we should, and we should be able to also see the read along showing up in the bottom there as a topic heading. Any questions so far?
Just thanks, Anna. It was a good example to go through of an existing record in the system and some things that would need to be changed.
I know we're kind of running short on time. I guess we're already over our time. We can go through more examples if people would like, or I don't know. What do you think the best way of doing this? We have more examples from that we were looking at last time, and the records are all a little different. We can continue if people have time to continue, or we could maybe schedule another time to look at these other records if people want. What would be the best course of action?
I think it might be good for folks to digest what they've learned today and then maybe come back and do another session with some more examples. Other thoughts?
Participants. Ellen, thank you. Okay, so Ellen says that she needs to go, so having a follow-up would be really helpful.
Hi, this is Ellen. I just wanted to add that this was hard for me to digest. Some of it's beyond my level, and so I can tell that I would really need to use this stuff in order to retain it. So having follow-up exercises or a session would be really helpful, definitely.
Okay, yeah, I know that this is all a lot to digest. And as I said, even when I've been like working on this stuff for months now to prepare these read-along training sessions and the documentation. And even I have to have all of my cheat sheets on hand to make sure that I'm doing things right, constantly looking up stuff as I work through this. So, yeah, if it feels like it's over your head, it's like that's kind of normal with this. And so maybe people do need a little bit more time to kind of digest it, have a chance to look at the cheat sheets a little more closely, and that way if we go and with the follow-up, when we go and look at more specific examples, everyone might be a little bit more prepared with their cheat sheets, and so that they can follow along more easily. Do other people feel the same way? Ellen just had to leave, but
Yes,
I'm not seeing any other. Oh, Leanne said yes.
I might also put in another plug that sometimes you may not have these kinds of things come up very often, and so it may be a while before you stumble across an item that you have to deal with this. Having kind of gone through this with Anna is a really good foundation, but also remember that you can call on any of the mentors at any point, or call on Anna if you need a little refresher just to walk through. That's part of what we're trying to do, is just be a resource for you as well.
Yeah, so even I think that it will be a good idea to maybe go through some more examples so that people can get a little bit more familiarity. But even after that, feel free, everyone should feel free to contact the mentors if it's still sounding confusing or if you've forgotten a lot of the stuff that we've gone over. So why don't we go ahead? It looks like people are starting to leave now. We got a yes from Leanne, which I imagine is yes for a follow-up to go over the specific examples. So why don't we go ahead with that plan, is to schedule very soon, maybe a time. I know, Beth, we're starting like evergreen training next week, right? But maybe we can figure out another time next week or the week after to look specifically at some of these examples so that what we've talked about today doesn't get, right, we don't get too far away from that, so people can recall this, but where people have a little bit of time to digest and look over the cheat sheets.
I'm thinking a couple weeks. That would allow folks to, for those who couldn't join us today, catch up with viewing the recording, and
Okay.
and also have some time to look at records.
Okay, and then also that will give us time to get all of this information, right, the slides up online as well, because that'll be another resource for you. I'll try and get some more stuff on the website that you can look at in preparation for then a session where, a strictly hands-on session where we go through the different examples and work together in modifying and verifying these different elements. Okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for coming today and joining in on this. I hope it wasn't too intimidating for you. And hopefully we will see you next time. Also, feel free to send us emails if you have any questions between now and then. Okay?
Thanks.